Well, good morning. I appreciate people taking the time to come. This is an important day. We've got a very important topic to talk about today, and that's about insurance costs in Michigan, auto insurance costs to be specific. I want to give a little background before I talk about the specifics of what we're getting into. But if you look at Michigan's too expensive for auto insurance, and you can see that on to your left, we have a chart that outlines Michigan versus the surrounding states. And you can see we're significantly higher than other states in the Midwest. We're the 8th highest in the country. And that's not a good situation. We need to do something about it in terms of our costs. When you look at, there's a number of features of why we're high cost. And that this is a package to hopefully address that in a number of aspects. One of the things that's important is we're too high on medical costs. And that's a key component of this issue. One of the things you always have to be sensitive when you talk about medical cost is you have to understand there's a need for medical care. People do get injured, and that there needs to be appropriate coverage. They need to get the right medical care, and that's something that we're considering as part of this proposal. One of the issues you find, though, is simply how charges are done in this situation in terms of what charges go out on auto insurance, medical claims versus other kinds of claims. And that's one of the things, if I'll point to one of the other charts here to give you an outline, that we think there needs to be some major reform in terms of the charges for auto-related medical claims. We just picked several procedures, but if you look at the chart to your right here, medical cost comparison by type of insurance, we compared Medicaid, workers' comp, and no-fault, and you can see they're dramatically higher for the auto insurance-related claims with no-fault. So one of the proposals, one of the major reforms here is to bring those in line with what would typically be paid by other forms of insurance. And I think that's one of the dramatic reforms here. One of the other pieces of reform get to the issue of what is the cap or limit on claims. But I would emphasize this is probably more important as this rate of cost as opposed to even the cap in some regard. We have a chart out, again, I apologize, Kevin. We got a big crew here of supporters that we have an outline here showing Michigan versus other no-fault states. Michigan is currently uncapped, which creates major issues. Our proposal is to put $1 million cap. And to give you some perspective, that's 20 times higher than the next highest state, which would be the state of New York. 20 times higher. You can see the rates in a number of other states. They're dramatically lower. And the point is again, we want to make sure people have medical care. Many people also have health insurance in a traditional fashion or other forms of care to deal with the situation to the degree they go beyond that cap. But those combinations can make a dramatic difference in insurance costs. And part of this proposal is to actually save our consumers money. That needs to happen. We're too high. And the goal here is, if you look at, we're showing a number here, but approximately saving the average family $250. In this legislation, it would specify that premium costs would come down by $125 per vehicle in the first year. And then hopefully, because of competition and other things, we could even see that increase in later years. So there's a significant savings to our consumers, $125 per vehicle, $250 overall for the average family, if you look at it. And again, I emphasize the need to do something. We need to do more, though. So this isn't the only component of the package. The medical cost management system is very important, but a couple other features I'd mention to you. One is we're talking about creating a better authority, a new authority for fraud, to deal with auto insurance fraud, that the industry would help support, that would be put in place. Again, if you look at costs in some of our cities, they're far too high. We have 3 of the top 10 most expensive cities in the United States for auto insurance. Medical costs are part, fraud is part. There's other reasons that we're going to continue to look at, but 3 of the top 10. When I looked at the list and I saw 3 of the top 10, they also gave me the list of the least expensive. And one thing that got my attention that I hadn't previously looked at is 3 of the top 10 for lowest insurance costs two are in Ohio and one's in Wisconsin. So it just makes the point, the Midwest does not need to be expensive. It needs to do it the right way. So there's an opportunity there with the Auto Insurance Fraud Authority being created. A couple other things I would mention is we want to be very proactive, and this is very encompassing, and wait for questions, and I'm not going to talk too long because we have so many great speakers to come. But we're also doing something, this is a procedure that will address one of the issues with the current HIC attacks in terms of the health insurance claims assessment, that a portion of the savings, again, not the dollars, those are 125 are net savings to consumers, there would be part of the dollar savings from this adjustment that would go towards a $25 assessment that would go towards dealing with our HICA shortfall. That would provide relief and dollars for programs for people in need in the state of Michigan. So that would approximately be $140, $150 million a year going towards that shortfall that we otherwise would suffer. So that's a reform. The other reform is we're looking to offer a low-cost option as a separate part of the process because about 20% of our drivers in Michigan are uninsured, and we have people in need that don't have the resources to buy insurance. So we're looking at potentially doing a parallel process with a pilot bill that would talk about offering insurance with a $50,000 cap that would go in place for people with good driving records that are lower income and have lower dollar value vehicles to address that. And again, a pilot project to do that. So to get people with more insurance, period. So this is a very comprehensive package of various things. I know you'll have lots of questions on it, but it's a very good thing. With that, though, I want to turn it over to people that are really some of the people making this work. And it's my partners in the legislature. I'm happy to be here with the committee chairs in terms of Representative Lund and Senator Hune. They're leaders on this topic. I'm going to turn it over to them. And then we've got two representatives from the insurance industry to talk about how this can really make things work better in Michigan. So with that, let me turn it over to Representative Lund. Pete?
Thank you. Insurance rates in the state of Michigan are too high, and it's time we do something about it. Those rates are too high not because of things happening outside the state of Michigan, but things that are happening here in Lansing, or specifically things that are not happening here in Lansing. And we need to do something about it. It's time for the legislature, under the governor's leadership, to take things and move forward. I want to emphasize a few things here. First of all, understand that right now, Michigan, when it comes to benefits, we are number one in the country. And if this bill passes, we will drop all the way to number one. And it's something that I don't think we can emphasize enough. As the governor pointed out with that chart there, going from unlimited to $1 million coverage is still 20 times higher than any other state in this country. That is an awful lot, and that gives so much protection to the people of Michigan. But I want to talk briefly about the new bill that we'll be introducing and comparing it a little bit to the last bill. Understand that we sat and we listened to some of the concerns people had with the last bill, and we've made adjustments. This new bill is not the same. This new bill takes into account a lot of the concerns. So things like the reimbursement we were told before should be market-driven rather than just put onto a fee schedule. The solution here does have a drive that is market-driven rather than just dictated by the state. The MCCA is something we've heard concerns with transparency. The new organization, the MCCC, that would take over is something that will be open to the public completely. It will not be run by the insurance companies. It will be appointed by the governor, the people who will run it, and future governors, so that it's open, has that transparency. They will be able to show their information. You will be able to find out that, go to their meetings. We will be creating a fraud authority with this bill. People complained that we had let fraud go too crazy in the state and we weren't doing anything to control it. This bill addresses that issue. Before, we heard concerns that the cap was too low in the previous bill, where we started it as low as $250,000. We heard that people wanted one rate, one cap, and they wanted that cap to be larger, so we moved it up to $1 million. I think one of the things that's important as we move forward, when you hear people opposing this, please, please, please question their assertions and their facts, because the facts that I read of the people who oppose this are so often so far from the truth. I ask you to make sure you double-check our information, what we tell you, because we'll stand by that. And I hope you do the same for everyone else as well, because this is too important of an issue to the people of Michigan to allow people to make accusations, throw numbers out there, and say things that just blatantly aren't true. And I hope that we can follow through with that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Senator Joe Hune, the chairman of the Senate Insurance Committee.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman Lund. And I have to say thank you to the governor for his leadership on this issue. Gosh, my first days in the State House, we started working on some type of reforms to the no-fault system, and it's wonderful to have a governor to literally embrace the issue and help us march forward. But again, it's $250 savings to the average family. But an average family of four with a couple teenage drivers, that's $500 savings per year, and still maintain the most generous benefits by 20 times the next highest state in the country, the most generous benefits in the country. So we are here to do what's right for Michigan, to provide some savings for our constituents, our citizens, and I look forward to taking up the issue when the House is completed with their work. And with that, I get to introduce Bev Barney from the Michigan Association of Insurance Agents.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. My name is Bev Barney. I am representing the Michigan Association of Insurance Agents. And again, our members, all of our members, are independent agents around the state, and they are also small business owners. They reside in every part of our state, and they serve literally thousands and thousands of insurance consumers every single day. MAIA's strong desire is to preserve what we know and what we believe is the best auto no-fault protection in the country. We also know that we need to address costs that are driving that up and making it more and more difficult for consumers to afford. We believe that a reasonable benefit of the $1 million limit and cap, reasonable reimbursements for attendant care, and reasonable reimbursements for providers will go a long way in making that happen, and at the same time provide consumers with substantial savings each year. Our members have seen the tragedy of catastrophic accidents up close. We believe that the governor's proposal is the best way we can come to preserve this great system while still continuing to protect our Michigan drivers. One of our members who is attending with us today is Scott McBride. Scott is with the Mason McBride Agency of Troy, Michigan, and he sees firsthand the challenges of consumers with the current no-fault system as it continues to escalate out of control with its cost. Scott is with us here today to share with you a few examples and insights. Scott.
Good morning. I'll just be brief. We think it's important to understand that the origin of this, the work that these folks have done, ultimately comes from the consumer. And one of the consistent messages that we hear in our firm and my staff hears over and over again for several years is, how do we get the cost under control? Ultimately, some of these consumers have to make choices about which coverage they can elect, which coverage they can afford. And ultimately, this process will also help get them through the next stage and allow them more affordable coverage. It's something we see every day. It's something we hear every day, and they've heard for years. So we look forward to working with the folks. They've done a wonderful job carrying this forward and for the consumer. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate all the comments from both my colleagues, my partners in the legislature, and people that are doing this for a living. And with that, let me open it up for questions on topic to begin with, if we could do that, please. Yes?
I have two questions. First of all, aren't you, by doing this, aren't you transferring the cost of auto insurance from insurance companies and the customers to taxpayers in the form of Medicaid? The Medicaid plans are going to have to pick up some of this cost, and I suppose Medicare also. And second of all, does this mean that the Republican leaders here are on board with the Medicaid expansion?
Well, I'll take the second one first. I'm not going to speak for any legislator on a particular topic, so that's up to them, and I suggest you follow up on a different measure. I think in some ways I view Medicaid expansion as an important component, and you know I'm an advocate of that. I think that ties into this because it helps address the uncompensated care issue, which is one of the underlying issues with this whole topic in some ways. But to go to your other point, I don't view this as just shifting costs. I view this as improving cost structures. Because, again, as I emphasized when we talked about the issues of cap and things like that, one of the most important pieces to me is not simply having a question of cap, it's actually managing the cost structures better. If you look at the schedule to your right, you can see it's dramatically higher in terms of no fault. And the real question is why is that, and shouldn't it be in line with those other cost structures? That's not just a cost shifting, that's fundamentally managing costs better than they've been in the past. The other part is things like the insurance fraud element. That's a real cost savings. So this is not about shifting. This is about substantive changes to make a better system for our consumers and for our drivers.
Well, how are you going to design what amounts to a price control providers for auto accidents? Go with a Medicare rate or something else?
Well, I think that's something to be worked through the legislation, but we've gotten good reinforcement. I appreciate Kevin Clinton being here, our insurance director in terms of that department, because you can do this in terms of managing through it. And that was one of the things as mentioned as one of the concerns. This isn't setting a fee structure as much as saying, let's look at comparable rates for other kinds of insurance, what's being paid by the medical community, and shouldn't it be a similar kind of rate? Why should there be essentially no controls or very high rates on auto-related insurance issues when there's many kinds of insurance out there, there's well-established prices being paid for them, and shouldn't it be the same kind of rate structure? Yes.
With cost management in place, there are many people who would say that certain injuries, they would blow through $1 million in the first few months. How would you address that?
Well, let's go to the starting point of this. In many respects, 99.5% of the claims that we have for medical costs are under $1 million. So you're talking a very limited number, but again, those are serious issues. But again, that's the point of saying there are other forms of compensation available or an insurance available. If someone has their own health insurance, if someone has Medicaid or Medicare, that's possible. And then the tort system is still available if they're not at fault in that accident. So there's a number of other mechanisms available. It's not to leave them without any recourse. The other part I would emphasize is when you talk about $1 million goes a whole lot farther when you have a structure in place that brings down those costs. So the way I look at it is $1 million cap that we're proposing in many respects might have been, I'm just speculating, could have been $2 million in cost under the old system. Yeah, Kyle.
Governor, is there going to be anything written in the bill that guarantees that ratepayers are going to pay lower premiums?
Yeah, for the first year. That would be essentially, my understanding is the legislation we're looking at would put the $125 per vehicle in for year one.
And then what happens after that?
Well, the market should work, but again, our expectation, if you look, I appreciate it, we had some people that had a much longer track record in Lansing than I have, talked about the experience with workers' compensation. Something was done like that back in the 80s, and they specified an amount, and what you found, the market worked, and actually the improvements, the savings were larger than the amount specified. I can't guarantee it here, but the point is let's create a marketplace where people can compete on insurance. Well, I think that would clearly happen in terms of if you look at the mechanisms of how this is being designed. One of the challenges is part of the reason for the cap issue is by having no cap from an actuarial point of view to figure out your reserves is tremendously difficult. And so that's why it was important to set a cap. But we set a cap. I like the expression, we were number one before and we're going to work hard. We're going to still be number one, 20 times higher than the next closest state.
Well, if the current NCCA fee is going to rise to $186 in July, what would the new NCCC fee be roughly when all this comes together?
I don't know if I could specify that. Again, the legislation will talk about a reduction to the consumer of $125 per vehicle, $250 per family.
We're still going to have this NCCA exist, grandfathered into the
Yeah.
currently in it. What happens to that money that is left over in NCCA after that fund expires? Does that go to the insurance companies? Ratepayers get a benefit? What happens?
Actually, I'll have to ask Kevin that question.
If there's money
Did you want to come over here, Kevin? Excuse me.
If there's money left over, and this will be years and years and years from now, if there's money left over in the MCCA fund, the current MCCA, that will go back to consumers. And if there's a shortfall, then consumers will have to pay. It's designed to be, self-fulfilling and a break even. So if the insurance companies get no money back, it will be either consumer or nothing.
Governor, is there anything to address the zip code or credit score-based rates that are being charged now in some of your cities?
Not specifically on that topic. I think this low-income, low-value vehicle or lower-value vehicle option is something that will be very helpful, though, in terms of looking at some of the opportunities there. So, again, we're always open to looking at different ideas. But this package is really geared towards managing the medical piece, the fraud piece, and then looking at creating an option to just get people to have more insurance.
The low-income option is going to be a pilot project.
Pilot project. Most likely, again, this will be a parallel piece of legislation. That will be a separate bill, and it's going to be based on, again, it's still being identified, but it'll be talking about if you're a certain percentage of the poverty level, you have a vehicle under a certain dollar amount, and you have a good driving record. Here's an opportunity to buy in to a policy with a much lower cap just so you can say you have insurance, which we should be encouraged versus an uninsured person.
You know what? I haven't counted yet. We haven't introduced the bill yet even. So let's wait till we introduce the bill before we start counting the votes.
I mean, obviously, you fell short last term.
Mhm.
There were some members of your caucus that were uncomfortable with the legislation as it was designed then. Have you spoken with those folks to get a sense of whether the changes made will move them to
We haven't told them all the changes yet. This is the governor's proposal, and we're working with the governor on it, but it's his proposal. And as many of you who called me yesterday trying to get the information, I told you, no, I'm going to let the governor introduce it, not me. And I told the same thing to our members. So we're going to take our time. We're going to get the bill introduced. We're going to run the hearings, and we're going to get it through committee, and then we'll work the full House.
Well, they're not directly connected, but I think it just shows our continuing approach to say it's about great customer service. We're trying to service our customers better, our citizens, by doing more effective management of cost structures in our state. As a practical matter, I still view road funding as an opportunity to save our customers money in the long term versus what they pay in the short term.
I wanted to ask Representative Lund, you had mentioned that there's some falsehoods being circulated. Could you be more specific and address?
I think the one, just like we heard the question about that the money was going to go to the insurance companies from the MCCA. There are things out there, and it's not everybody, but some people. The outrageous things that are being said by some of the people who oppose this are just amaze me. And I hope that when you hear some of these things, outrageous as they may be, I hope you ask them for their documentation, and hope that you actually ask them to point out where in the bill it says that. Because the opposition to this has had no trouble just throwing facts out there that aren't true.
And is there any other facts we should be aware of, any pitfalls that you want to warn us to?
Now
I'm not going to circulate their incorrect statements. I'll let you do that.
When all this is sorted out, the rate reduction, the new fee, and everything, does the insurance industry come out ahead, even? How does it turn out?
Well, again, the goal here is to help the consumer, our citizens, our customers. But as a practical matter, I think it helps all of us in terms of, hopefully, the insurance industry. Again, this is about good competition in a marketplace. I would hope it just makes it easier in the sense that more people have coverage and they have higher quality coverage in terms of dealing with issues, which helps the quality of life, and then let a good insurance marketplace be competitive.
Why are the motorcycle rates so much? The motorcycle average?
Again, there's a whole different litany of issues. That will be part of the process, but again, we want to get a starting point in terms of motorcycles, uninsured people, pedestrians, different people like that to put out there that are still as high as the highest other state in the nation.
Yeah, I think one thing that, the governor mentioned the word starting point. I think it's important to understand, too. When you hear people talk about, well, why don't we change it this way, change it that way, I hope when they say they want to make the change, they say how much they're willing to give up in the rate rollback. Because if you're going to change things, if you're going to raise this and lower that and change that, it's got to have an effect on the bottom line and cost the people more money. So I hope when they start saying, why don't we do this instead, ask them how much money they're willing to give up from the people of Michigan to get that change.
And just so I'm sure, you're requiring the auto insurance companies to lower their premiums by $125.
Yes, in year one. Yes.
But if we lower it 125, we're still going to be the highest state in the Midwest here with our rates. Why is that? Isn't there other things we can do?
Well, that's part of the Insurance Fraud Authority being created. That's about looking at this option to get more people insured in general. Again, our work is not done, and I thought I made that clear, that this is a good starting point, but there's more work to be done in managing our costs, because there still is a reasonable question about how we can continue to do better in Michigan.
The premium discrepancy, correct me if I'm wrong, how does that tie to medical? I mean, the catastrophic claims premiums is separate.
Well, that's included in that number. You're seeing that. That's included in there. And that's a significant portion. And if you look at the cost increases, the rate of cost increase, they've been very high.
Is there going to be, for people who have these claims that go beyond $1 million, is there going to be a mechanism in place for them to be shifted over then to their private insurers or to whatever plan they'll have to go to?
Well, I think that's something you'd always find in the process, that they should be aware of what their current medical insurance is. I mean, that's part of the discussion they should be having, and there's hopefully a lot of opportunity to have that discussion in a thoughtful way prior to hitting that cap. Sure.
Effective 1/1, everybody in the state is supposed to have health insurance according to the Affordable Care Act. Without annual limits, without lifetime limits, and without Michigan isn't the only state that has catastrophic injuries, but just about every other state has their health care handling this as opposed to their auto insurance.
And from the senior citizen standpoint, understand the senior citizens in this state have been paying the same Medicare rate into it the whole time as everyone else, and they're paying for it twice. They're paying for this health care in this policy, in their auto insurance policy, and in their Medicare rate. So they've been paying double for it all this time, and this will help put an end to that.
So, well, I appreciate it. I've been given the high sign. One. I think this is a new record, though. The questions have all been on topic, so I appreciate it. Yeah, what I would say is, given what happened in Boston, there's an enhanced set of vigilance going on. But I would give credit to the state police and people in our state that we've traditionally always been very vigilant. So I would just define this as to say we're very active through the Michigan Intelligence Operations Center to make sure we're looking at all the information going on, what's going on the web, the internet, any sources of information. The most important thing I would say to the citizens of Michigan is if you think you're running across something that should be a concern in terms of personal security, national security, any of these issues, speak up. Contact us. Because that's the best way we can deal with these issues is we're working hard. We're going to continue that. We've got a great track record. But if a citizen hears something that should be a concern, that worries you, speak up. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor.
Very good. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll see you bright tonight.